Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to No More, No Less. My name is Michael Chikeen, and today I'm with Marcy Axelrod. Marcy's here to discuss how the act of showing up fully in our lives essentially hands us the keys to a happier, more effective, and balanced life. Marcy has been a keynote speaker for over 25 years. She's the award-winning author of On Your Game, and she's also a strategy and innovation consultant. Marcy challenges her clients and all of us to reflect on exactly how we show up in all aspects of our lives. Do we just show up, barely show up, or do we truly show up, living our most decisive moments with thoughtful intent? Showing up is the invisible system all around us, connecting us to society, situations, ourselves, and each other. And drawing from psychology, neuroscience, and evolutionary biology, showing up is the crucial playbook for leading an impactful, high-achieving life, all while taking care of the world and each other. So without further ado, Marcy Axelrod, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm very excited to be here with you.
So before we start recording, you're saying that the concept of showing up showed up in your life when you were younger, when you were around 6. And I always like to see and understand how people lead into these new thought patterns, these books, these giant concepts. And so I'd like to start there.
Right, absolutely. And it's extremely rare for someone to know their calling when they're 6. In fact, professors at Stanford found that only 20% of people understand any kind of passion that they have. 80% of Stanford students, when asked, "What's your passion?" they said, "Oh my goodness, that's so stressful. I don't have one." So for me, what happened, as you can imagine, is an adversity, right? Something that you have to tackle and something that ended up shaping my entire life, which is that I couldn't show up the way I wanted. I started to stutter. So we moved. That was the external triggering event. The genetic predisposition was already there in the genes. And, with the stress of you're in a new home, you've lost your friend, you are in a new school, your parents are all of a sudden focused on their new jobs. And yeah, my throat just started to lock. So what it led to is my observing and becoming extremely frustrated because there were all these other kids not even caring how they showed up, not choosing how they showed up. But to me, they had a choice. Now, granted, they're 6, 7, 8 years old. Maybe they're not so with it,
Right.
But, some were bullies or they were mean and others were fearful and others were shy. And to me, it was just, why aren't they choosing how they're showing up? Why don't they just make this easier? As I got older, my parents then sent me to a rehabilitation hospital to learn how to speak. And I got another dose of how hard it was for people to show up. Because, there were elders there filled with wisdom. And they had these plans of, learning how to speak or how to sit or how to walk, whatever it was. They had experts with them. And yet they were struggling. So I realized even people that know how they want to show up with well-laid plans, with experts by their side, are still struggling to show up as they choose. And what I took away from this is we need a roadmap. We need a blueprint. Surely nature has designed such a thing. So I started to devour psychology and psychiatry and biology and physics. And sure enough, there was the connectedness of the messages of the science that had a model. And I said, why doesn't anyone know this? This is how nature designed humans to show up so that we thrive.
And then because showing up it can be really turned into so many different situations for all of our lives. And where do you think is the number one place that people aren't showing up? That is the easiest place to start.
Sure. Yeah. Well, everyone needs to make that choice for themselves. And I don't know that the easiest is the best. Maybe that's kind of the low hanging fruit where you test things, but maybe you choose what really matters. So there are three levels of showing up that I'll talk about, and my research shows 80% of us just show up 80% of the time, right? So the problem that I'm solving with this book is, for some people, they feel like they're just sleepwalking through life. They're just kind of going through the motions. They're phoning it in. For others, you lay in bed at night and there's a dissatisfaction. Like, wait, how did I get here? Where's my life going? I'm not, my relationship with my kids isn't what I want. My marriage isn't great. My work, I'm not, that's not really my path that I feel called to do. So, different people are suffering with different things, but in essence, what I recommend people do is choose the part of life that they're kind of the most dissatisfied with and want to work on, and start there. And whenever you want, I'll show the model if that's of interest.
Sure.
Yeah. So nature designed us in three roles. And I will explain what those three roles are. But first, I just want to mention something really, really simple, which is that there's always a level of how we show up. And you can see here, green, red, orange, red. 1, 2, 3. Very simple. And I'll give you these graphics for you to put up for the audience. So green is truly showing up. That's when we're focused, we're intentful, our body is calm. We're really much more about the human beings in front of us. We're using our right hemisphere, which I will get into. There's a connectedness that's so deep that it comes with an intent to serve, right? It's a withness that gets to an invoking care level. What most of us do most of the time when we're in this like get it done mode, you have your do list, there's some pressure, you're irritable, anything like that, you're in a rush, you just got to get the stuff done. That's in the orange. That's the middle. It's level 2. It's what 80% of us do 80% of the time. We're very much in our left hemisphere. And what our left hemisphere is doing, it's not the one where we can connect and feel the relationality of everything. I wouldn't be able to feel the language of your body right now, Michael, if I was just getting stuff done. It would be, okay, there's Michael there. There's a person there. Fine, done. But I wouldn't be feeling you. I wouldn't be caring about you. So there's no leadership going on. There's no parenting of quality. There's no friendship. There's just stuff that's getting done. And I can explain more about what the hemispheres really do. That's different. But that's kind of the just show up mode that's in the middle. It's level 2. And then when we are really not able to show up with intent or care, and we just keep being either distracted or we just, when there's something really wrong, when you're sick, when you're ill, when you're burned out, when you're depressed, when you're really anxious, you're in this barely there mode.
Right.
And the reality, not just of our behavior, the reality of all of life is that all three of those levels are going on. You're right. You might wake up. If you're a morning person, you're truly showing up. You're in the green. You're really a full human.
Right.
And you're in the green, but then, you've done some really hard work. The oxygenated glucose in your brain has been spent, right? You need a break. You need to take a walk. You need some food. Maybe you need a rest. So we go down to the orange, maybe even the verge of the red. Maybe then we get a phone call. It's great news. We're happy. We're alive. We planned, to see our best friend later. But then something stressful happens. So you can see we're bouncing around that line all day long. And so is everybody else.
Right.
And one of the points of the book is choose. Yes.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's a perfect time to discuss distraction as far as phones, health devices that we have on. Everyone's trying to do a million different things at once, and it's it's easy to just show up to a lunch with friends or a dinner with someone who's going through something, but then to really show up or truly show up, as
Mhm.
you say in your book, I think it's the hardest part, to realize that the moment that we're in is it's not just our moment, but the moment of the people that we can potentially impact. And that doesn't mean that we have to intentionally impact someone with advice or care or help them move. Like sometimes it's just sitting there and listening intently. And it's amazing. I really like your delineations between just show up, barely show up, and truly show up, because show up really could mean you're there in person, but you're not actually there and being present with the people that you're around.
Uh, Absolutely. So I'm going to add a couple layers of depth to what you just said.
Sure.
So the presence with someone, what I call attuning, right? So presence will lead you to the gate, but it stops you. Presence doesn't step you in. I use the word attuning because when you're attuning, you're actually feeling with. You are enacting care. The chemistry of your body is changing because of the person you're with. Maybe you show up and you're more calm and they're more anxious. You're going to reset them and they're going to move you toward them. So you're going to become more anxious, absorbing their energy, but you're also going to become more calm if I'm grounded in who I am, which is the skill for our self role. I'm just going to mention the roles and then we can get into it in more depth because it's really important. We are not just selves. This is huge. And by the way, there's a big S self and a small S self, and I'll define that too. We're not just selves. We're situation members at every moment. Even if you're laying in bed alone, there's a situation going on. You're feeling some version of witness with the sheets, the bed, the room, the temperature, your thoughts for the day. There's stuff going on that changes you. And there's an interpretation of the world going on. So we're always in our situational role, and there's a skill for it called readiness, which is deep. So I will talk about that. We're also always a member of something larger, a community, a society, a family, a sports team, a school district, a company, a team, the global world. We're always a member of something larger. So our three roles: self, situation member, societal member. The skill for each: grounding in ourselves, ready for our situations, and connectedness with intent to care. For our societal role, there's a word I put on that, which is all intelligence. All intelligence is connected with intent to care. So we can get back to all of that, but the point is, you were saying showing up, right? Sometimes it's just being there and listening. And what I want to explain is that when you're really there listening, you're attuning. Your situational role is changing that person. That is truly showing up.
All right. We talked about something earlier as well that I'd like to dive into fully, and that's, so in the zeitgeist now for a couple of years, there's been this giant concept of showing up for other people,
Right.
for showing up for your friends, for your family, and how to be a good friend and a good person and a good community member, and all those things I think
Mm-hmm.
are super valuable. But one thing that you
Mm-hmm.
said that I think is not really spoken about too much at all is showing
Mm-hmm.
up for yourself,
Yeah.
because I think if we can show up for ourselves primarily, I think it gives us the fuel and the foundation to more fully show up for other people. And I was hoping you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really important concept. I was just asked about that at my recent book talk and book signing out here in a suburb in Westchester, New York. So this is a this is big because self, as I said, small s self, big s self. The small s self is our societally defined self. Often who we think we are is defined by society. It's not who we are. It's not this performative mode of I took this job because it's prestigious or because I need to make somebody else proud or I need to make people look at me and as if I am prestigious in some way or I've earned something. That's really a small s self, right? And you go out and do the faux self care that's out there. You do the vacation, you buy the clothes, all this very superficial stuff, right? Women get their nails done in their hair and all this. And you kind of notice, gee, I've spent a lot of money and time. I'm not feeling any better. So that's not showing up for yourself. Okay. Defining yourself is the way society does, and succumbing to that messaging, like those are stories that are just crap. So jettison that, right? That's your small s self. You will not feel a sense of meaning in life. You will not your relationship with yourself and others won't have the depth that we all seek if we live in that small s self. The big S self is the one that relationally recognizes we're part of so much more.
Hmm.
Every tree is part of every other tree. We are connected at the level of leaves on a tree as humans. We are of the earth. So every indigenous society has known this. They define the big S self. Every contemplative practice has the big S self at the root. And notably, the root of almost every religion on the planet, when you really look for it, talks about the big S self, right? God is in each of us, right? So when you talk about self-care, right, and showing up to your friends, the more we recognize that that self-care shows up in recognizing we don't stop at our skin and our skulls. They feel us and we feel them. And the greatest gift we can give them is to be calmly attuned, right? Present plus, right? Attuned to them, because attuning steps us through that gate such that we're not just noticing, we're tuning in. Like these are levels of showing up. Noticing is in the middle, tuning in, and then enacting care. That brings us from the orange level 2 into the green level 3. And I'm going to show you, there's a diagram in the book that layers this in, and I can tell people what the page is.
Right. Well,
I
I
believe
want to
it's in
speak to you a bit
chapter
about
3.
how you mentioned the showing up for yourself, because I think I think the way I have understood the things you were saying was about showing up for yourself has a
Yeah,
lot to do with accountability, and the way that I interpret it. Whereas, for example, if you don't show up for yourself
right.
by not by not drinking enough water or not sleeping enough,
Sure.
then we are just simple creatures. If you don't show up for yourself by having the right nutrition, like you're going to
Right.
be hungry and tired and irritable, and then you end up being an asshole. Like all of
Love
us, all of us just have these really simple triggers. All of us, if we haven't slept well for a couple nights, we're just more irritable. Like
that. Right.
if we're like sometimes we think we're hungry, we're just thirsty, or we're not feeding ourselves, or we're not exercising. Like there's all
Yeah.
these things that are so basic to our
Right.
biology that if we're not accountable to ourselves for what we need, and we need
Right.
care, we need connection, we need love, we need friendships, we need
Right.
these things to make us feel whole. And so the way I've interpreted the things you're saying is that if we're not accountable to ourselves for what we need, then
Right.
we can't feel safe and ready and well taken care of,
Ground.
and then we can start distributing how we feel to other people.
Yes. Yes. So the distribution is going to happen by default, and I'll explain the statistics around that and the science in just a minute. So the role grounding, the skill for our self role is groundedness. Grounding is defined as knowing who you are and why, and meeting your basic needs. And I'm going to explain that. Yes, water, right?
Right.
Um, Sleep. These things are huge. Water, sleep, taking time to recharge, journal, right? Um, Reset as often as you need, every hour, every 10 minutes. You can close your eyes. There's a lot of embodied practices that I recommend. One of which that I talk about in my TED talk that I get messages about it, like, oh my God, Marcy, this is just a life changing thing, is you take two fingers and you write on your palm, you trace a 3 for level 3, truly showing up. Realistically, you can trace anything. The point is that you're feeling something that's unusual and it brings you into your body, because we're only doing one thing at a time, right? Our brain, you can call it our brain, even though we have, more neurons in our gut than, dogs and cats, but, so the brain's kind of everywhere, but we're either focusing our attention, our mind is wandering, or we're sensing. So what this does is it brings us into our sensing system. And are you going to be afraid if you're focused on this soft, gentle 3 going into your hand on your palm? No. Are you going to be stressed about what does that person think about me? No. Are you going to be concerned for how am I going to get there at 4 o'clock? My other meeting, goes until 4, right? No. Right. You're going to reset. So truly showing up for others does require a level of grounding that's not shallow. So you need to bring yourself into your body. You need to reset. Ideally, you clear your mind, but you're also clearing your body of the stress. So it's not just clearing your mind. Like there's a lot of phrases that we use that are so misleading and actually harmful because it's not clearing our minds. Let's face it. Cortisol exists in our body also, as does adrenaline and oxytocin and all these wonderful things. By the way, there's more serotonin and oxytocin developed in our gut than in our brain. So resetting is really important so that we can truly show up. But the mindset of everything I do goes out into the world, right? We are that pebble in the water. It goes out and we can't stop it. Someone who's with you, who observes you, even passively observes you, they're 45% more likely to do what you do. And this comes up in every podcast I do. It's the work of Nicholas Christakis up at Yale. The main 20 people who you're with are 45% more likely to think, feel, and act the way that you do. It's just science.
Right.
And it's measured with in things like voting behavior, staying married, how much you drink, the degree of risky behaviors, your body size. I mean, whether you go to the gym, all sorts of things that have been measured. But the thing is, it doesn't stop with those 20 because those 20 people are with another 20 people. So now it's 400 people. So that second degree out is 25% more likely to think, feel, and act the way that you do. It doesn't even stop there, Michael. The next 20 people out, so it's 8,000 people now, 20 times 20 times 20. They're 10% more likely to do what you do. Those are the ripples. I have just put numbers on the ripples of how we impact the world. And it goes on forever.
Right. Well, there is some thought out there, more theory than anything, that it's possible that human beings move as an organism and we just don't understand how interconnected we are. Like you said about trees, which has just come out recently, of how communicative they are and how healing and helpful they are to each other. We know that mycelium of the, how mushrooms make up the entire planet. And so it's not so much of a stretch to believe that potentially humans are one giant organism and that we are all connected. So if we start spreading it, it becomes like this idea that sounds like a Beatles song or some movie, where if we start spreading more love, acceptance, and care to ourselves and our communities, then these are things that can ripple out, as you said. And that I think it does make sense. It starts with how you show up every day to the people in your community, because then that will ripple out, hopefully, ideally, into the rest of the world.
There's no hopefully, ideally. Absolutely. And so everything we do is out there. Every emotion we have ends up being out there in some way. Now, especially if we're out with people, but even if we're with ourselves, because it stays in us and it's part of who we are. Right. Just like everyone who came before us is in us. We still live the trauma of our parents and their parents and their parents. This is known in the work of Rachel Yehuda, who's the one who coined the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in the 90s. She did the seminal research on the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors and found out that they have greater what's called all form mortality. It sounds awful. Basically every big disease that's out there, they have more of it, and they actually die younger. And it's a very scary thing. But it's not just that's just the group that she studied. But we're all the children and grandchildren of the soldiers of all the wars that have been out there, and every bit of discrimination and racism and anti-Semitism and bullying. We're all the result of people who experienced that. We're also the result of the people who experienced tremendous care and kindness and love. So it's all in us, but it's up to us to be intentful about how do I want. This is something I asked in a survey recently that I ask in actually all of my show up surveys. I do evergreen research.
Sorry, one second. If you can stay where you are now to the microphone, because
Oh,
otherwise
sure,
you go back.
sure. So I'm going to ask you. One of the questions that I asked around preparing for activities in your day, how often do you ask yourself, how do I want others to feel in my presence? What percentage do you think check that box that they ask themselves that?
Oh, I would say very low, very, very, very low. I don't know, 10%.
So I think people gave themselves a little pat on the back, maybe that they didn't deserve. My statistics show 27%.
Okay.
27%. Okay, but what it means is that 70% of us don't think about, how am I impacting others? How do I want them to feel around me?
Right.
I mean, isn't that the main question of leadership?
Right.
Because if people don't feel your care, there's no loyalty. You're just a pawn that they're moving around their business chessboard about, how can I add more dollars and cents to my bottom line?
Right. Not to mention in our closest relationships with our friends or our partners, like it's one thing to support a partner, and there's another one to bring your presence if you're constantly anxious or worried, and this heaviness that we expect, our
Mm-hmm.
closest partners and friends to do the heavy lifting, and that's not their job. If people can support us, that's great, but I think our job is to show up for ourselves. Otherwise, we're asking them
Yeah.
to show up for us when we're not willing to do it for ourselves, and that becomes, I'm sure, a
Right.
much more complicated and negative cycle between two people.
Absolutely. And I really would love you and your listeners to carry with you the concept self. We don't stop at our skin and our skulls. We're not designed to. We're leaves on a tree. What we do impacts everybody. So when you think just the self-care that you're doing, it's not just for you, it's for society. It's for the people you're in situations with. It's for everyone. And frankly, I view it as a responsibility. And I really let people have it in the chapter on just showing up.
Mm-hmm.
I say, basically, we are each other's custodians. We are each other's environment. We create who others are. We are their society.
Oh, hold on. That is a great line, that we are each other's environment.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to stay with me for a little while, because when we think of environment, obviously we think of trees and rolling hills and where we live in the cities. But I think we kind of dismiss that a lot of these places that we live are other people, and so other people are absolutely our environment. And
Right.
you can think of pollution factors in our environment, but we don't think of other people that can be emotional polluters for how we live in the world. That is great.
Thank you. We also have to create the ecosystem. So because we are each other's environment, you say, well, what does that really mean? It means that it's imperative upon us to create an ecosystem that we want to truly show up with, to, and for.
Right.
That is a healthy, responsible ecosystem caring for everyone else who's impacted. Don't forget those 8,000 people. That's every moment of every day. It's relentless. That's so the phrase that you introduced me with, showing up, is the invisible system all around us. It's everywhere and you can't get rid of it. It is literally our operating system. So that's why we have to fortify it.
I was just saying, I don't think people really understand the feedback loop either from these small little, even micro interactions or larger interactions with the world and with each other. If we're
Yeah.
showing up in every
Right.
moment, if you're in a coffee shop just speaking to a
Right.
barista and you can
Yep.
just smile and be kind, like we have these small feedback loops
Right.
that I personally have believed this for a long time, that kind of feed the rest of your life. That
Right.
if you give love and kindness and generosity to other people, it doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice yourself. You can just be kinder. If you have an ability to make someone's day a little bit brighter, you can. But these feedback loops all come and they become this like virtuous cycle that I think fuels the rest of your life. And so I think that's why even subconsciously when I came across your profile
Mhm.
to be a guest, I felt it's something that I've been doing and something that I've seen growing up from the people, from the family in my life, that has really informed a lot of how I want to show up in the world.
That is terrific. Is it at all helpful to, so given what you said, does the recognition that we're always in a societal role and a situational role in addition to a self role, does that help you, and like, is that meaningful in some way?
Knowing that how we show up and that
It's
we
not
are
just a self.
involved and that we're yeah I think so. I think the for me, what I think the missing bit is that there's this kind of narcissistic self-importance that I think
Right.
is permeating parts of the world right now. And I
Right.
think that's important, but I think it's also misleading because that's not so much showing up for yourself.
Right.
I think that's how you want people to view you aside for how you view yourself.
Right. It's the performative role. It's not authentic, and it will leave people feeling hollow, and it will leave a lack of meaning. And what it means is that, let's say, like, for the parent and friend and leader that we want to be, that version of ourselves is inconsistent
Right.
with the kind of individualized self-care role, because we are not separate. Okay, there's a metaphor that I really like. Take a spoon and dip your spoon into the ocean, and now you have a spoonful of ocean. Is that spoonful of ocean different and separate from the ocean? It is the ocean. Now it might be kind of on your spoon, right? Just like we're like, you aren't named Marcy Axelrod. You didn't grow up in my home. You seem like you're a separate person, but just like that spoonful of water is the full extent of the ocean, right? It's been through all the history of the ocean, and it had, it may have more or less, versions of algae at the moment, but it's in the flow. That's the relationship that we are with each other.
Well, there's even a lot of studies to say people that live together, you're exposed to people that have very negative patterns or very negative people, things like that, really seep into who we are.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I think and I've seen people that have been in marriage and relationships with people and have gotten divorced, and it's taken them the way the conversations I've had with them is that like it's like you need to be on emotional dialysis for a couple of years after those
Right.
experiences, and it's never any one person's fault. Sometimes it's just a dynamic, or maybe they went through something traumatic, and like I'm not here to blame anybody, but sometimes being in those negative situations for so long, I think it takes so long to get that sludge
Right.
of negativity, of
Right.
toxicity out. And then I think once we can finally rid ourselves of it, I think we need to start anew and start showing up for people in a different way. But it's really hard. I think the first is like the concept of saying like, okay, well, what do I need now, and how do I feel? And I think we can act from there.
Yes, we can choose our behavior at every moment. What I recommend to people is I say, look, choose the most important either part of your day, relationships, whatever it is that you want to work on. Choose the most important thing. Truly show up for that. For that. Forget the rest of it. You can just show up all day long and bounce along the continuum all day long. But for that, truly show up. And what that means, you got to reset your body. You've got to and envision, how do I want that person to feel in my presence? I have a bunch of other very specific recommendations in the book about how to truly show up for the most important things. You will change. You will change as a human being
Hmm.
when you do that. The people you're with or the activity, whatever it is, will shift. It will show up to you differently, right? Because we show up to the world partially because of how it shows up to us. But the way it shows up to us is based on how we attend. If it's
Right.
okay, Michael, let me get into the hemispheres because it's really important.
Sure.
And then I also, just before I do that, I just really quickly want to show this diagram because it explains, oops, am I getting there? It explains the relationship between showing up and our roles. The more
Sure.
you
So so
show up,
so
the more you're,
so for people that
yeah,
that are listening, it's a bar, a spectrum essentially going from the left red to the green right, and on the left is barely there for yourself, and the middle is just showing up, and then the green is truly showing up for your life and for others.
right. And on the left side, we're in not just our self, on the green, truly showing up. We're in not just our self role. We're also deeply in our situational role, attuning, present, showing up to it, knowing it's showing up to us, and we're also connected with intent to serve. So that's our societal role. We're in all three of our roles with all three of our skills, and then on the what's really important about this version of the show up continuum is that it shows on the left side when you're barely there, there's a self focus. Your mirror is facing you, and that's all that matters. It's just you. You're separate from, you're fractured, you're divided, you're isolated, you're lonely. I mean, maybe there's depression, there's anxiety, there's illness, whatever it may be. You're burned out, so that's barely there. It's only your self role. As you move through just showing up, you're noticing others and the more that's out there. You're noticing the environment. You're starting to care. You're
Right.
starting to tune in. And then you move into the green, which is feeling with and then enacting care. So that's really important. And that's how it moves. Um,
Yeah, I think a
now,
lot of this is very difficult. Like I don't think any of this is easy because sometimes we really don't want to show up. We don't have the energy to show up.
right.
And I think at least for me sometimes like my instinct for sometimes is no. I don't want to do that. I don't like it's easier to just not do these things. And for me and maybe for other people sometimes when there's something that I get the feeling that I probably should do, I think of the people that I know love me the most and that I love them, and I think of well how would they expect or like me to act. A big
Mm,
driver for me in a lot of social situations, at least,
yeah.
is my grandfather who passed several years ago. But and I think of what would he in this do in this situation? What
Yeah.
like how would he like me to be to this person or to these people? And it helps inform a lot of my decisions. Like it wouldn't really show up, let's say in a business deal. It would be because it would be like this is something else. But he would also want me to be ethical, to be kind, to be
Right.
honest, and all of these things. And so it can bleed into other factors. And so many times where I didn't want to do something, or let's say I said I was going to go to some birthday I don't want to go to anymore. I think, well, I gave my word I was going to go, and shit, that means that I have to go. And so I don't know. Maybe there's another way for people to find a north star for them to show up
Hmm.
as their best self, and
Yes.
I think they should use that. I don't know what that is for them, but that's what tends to work for me.
That is so beautiful. I was just on a podcast yesterday it was a mental health podcast with a gentleman out of South Africa where there's a lot of, grief. And he said the same thing. He said it was his grandmother who helps him to truly show up. And really what the two of you are doing is you're turning your self mirror outward because what you're doing is feeling that person. You're feeling with that person and you're enacting care for that person. So you see how now you're in the green, level three, truly showing up because you're not just an isolated self. You're within the situation. That person is alive for you right now, as you think about my integrity, my word, the kindness you said, right? The kindness with which that person wants you to show up for others. So you have enacted care now for your grandfather in this moment with how you show up to your situation and to others. So notice how your self role is not just self, it's situation, and it's the more that's out there, which is your grandfather. It also makes you ask, like, what is death? Because your grandfather's with you, right? Just like in nature, because this is nature's model, right, of how humans are designed to show up. A leaf that might start as a bud, right? There's a branch first there's no bud, and then there's a bud. And that bud becomes a leaf. Now it's the end of autumn, and the leaf falls down and it's crinkly and dry. And over time, it becomes dust and dirt, and it fortifies the soil and becomes the nutrition for the tree, right? So death, like nature, relentlessly kills itself and regrows, right? So the example of our elders in us, that's the cycle. He's in
Right.
you, and he'll always be in you. And therefore he's in how you show up. So he's going to be in your friends. He's going to be in your offspring if you choose to have them. He's going to, right?
Right. Well, I think it also speaks to how you were saying that we all affect one another, because it's this how we affect other people and act towards other people, I think stays with them over time. And I think if I had someone on the podcast not too long ago who was he almost planned a school shooting, and he tells a story of his entire life and never went through with it, and how awful his upbringing was, how abusive his parents were, how neglectful they were, how violent they
Oh,
were, and the way that he was able now to show up for other people, and he gives talks to federal enforcement agencies and all these things, is that it seems like he thinks for what people that love him gave to him, and that was only one or two friends he still had available. So I think it just has to be, if you can't find enough people in your life that have showed you enough kindness and love, I think maybe we have to look towards the people that we love and look towards that as like a fuel,
yeah,
and then it can go out from there. But I think that's why these things are so difficult, because I think we become so isolated and so
right,
disconnected from
right,
each other, and it's hard to invest and think that we're worthy, that people want us to be there, that we
right,
will make a difference, that we will show up. But I think we'll all
right.
make gigantic differences in the lives of the people that we touch.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And it's our society. It was the Industrial Revolution, Michael, that led us to separate, to divorce from the connectedness that we are born into. Okay, because we're no longer feeling like we're of nature. We're in cities more. We're in our cars
Right.
more. Our language uses violence, right? To do well means you've killed it, right? I mean, there's so much, you know, growing up and getting a job that's in a role for a company so that we can get money to none of that is how we're designed to thrive. But it's the society we live in. It pulls us out of our authenticity. It pulls us out of the fullness of being a human being. And that's why we have epidemics of anxiety and of depression. And it's why, one third of people in America is lonely. And it's why our 19th and 21st Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, wrote a book, not about cancer or obesity or about the drug epidemic. He wrote a book called Together about loneliness, because, that's killing more of us than, smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Anyway, the point is that living in the modern society, right, and connecting through tech, which only addresses the five senses of connection in the brain out of the nine that we actually have. So four are just not even being used. Anyway, that is what has really driven us to these epidemics that we have. 50% of teens are on SSRIs.
Wow.
I myself have a child who's at a treatment center. She hasn't lived in my home, unfortunately, for 6 months and like 14 days. And I was crying every day for the first, 6 months, but it's been 14 days now, so I'm not crying. Yeah, I mean, none of us are untouched by the, mental and physical impacts of living separate from how society designed. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. And, I might have gotten it wrong in many ways. There's a lot of intellectualism in the book and a lot of physics and science. And maybe the next one will be a novel that really grips people in a more visceral way. But the concepts need to get out there. Showing up is a mindset that reintegrates us with ourselves, our situation, society, and each other, right? That's what it is.
Right. Well, I think it's even part of how divided some people can be, down political lines, or the way people are, it's become a
Exactly.
really weird world. Well, when one person tells you what their view is on one thing, and you can tell what they think about 40 other things, which is just insane. Like if you tell me
Right.
what you think about, I don't know. I don't want to get controversial, but like about one specific thing in the world, and then I can guess what political party you follow, what you believe, and all these things. That's just not how things could be,
Right.
because life is more complicated than that. Like every different issue needs a different eye on it for people to evaluate things. It's not
Yeah.
all team based. And so I think the idea of just, if we can just show up for each other, I think if more of us knew
Right.
that other people were there and they cared, and that even if someone disagrees with you, they still love you and want the best for you, I think we could at least give a benefit of the doubt to people that don't agree with us, and that perhaps we can try to find
Mhm.
solutions together.
Right. I love that. Let me add a little bit of neuroscience to what you said with the political divide and kind of treating each other as objects as opposed to as human beings. So our brain has two parts, and it turns out most mammals going back thousands of years also have divided brains. And the question is why. A gentleman named Ian McGilchrist, he's a psychiatrist from the UK, wrote some very powerful books about this. And it really explains why we just show up most of the time, and why we suffer from the things that we do, and why our modern world, in essence, went the way that it did. So very simply, to survive, we needed to pay two different kinds of attention. We needed to be able to, feed ourselves, but we also needed to not get fed to the predator over there. And it turns out, to do that, we needed to attend to the world in two different ways. One is a very narrow, fractured, separate, definitive attention, right? There's a berry on the bush. And right here with my right arm, because I'm using my left hemisphere, which controls the right side, with my right arm, I'm going to grab it and get it. I got to focus down a lot, a lot, a lot. And the moment I see the berry, it's almost like it's a map. I'm not looking at how the berry sways in the wind and how the sun is reflecting on the berry. It's a berry. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get this damn thing done. And I'm going to do it now. And that's all that matters. And guess what? The rest of the world disappears. If there's a predator, I'm not seeing it. It disappears. But in the moment that I pause, now I can reconnect with my right hemisphere. And that's the one that sees the bigger picture. That's the one that's up on the mountain and says, now I see what's really going on. And that's the one that feels the wind on us. And that's the one that notices the expression on your face and cares about you. That's the one that attunes to you with that resonance, where my brain waves and yours are actually resonating when we look eye to eye. That's the one that cares about you. And it's the one that wants to sway to the music. Okay. Now, love is only from the right hemisphere. Care, it's only there. Anger lateralizes left. Like, are you with me? It turns out if you have a stroke in the right hemisphere, the one that is the more human side that feels what you feel, by the way, which is where leadership lives, which is where good parenting lives, which is where happiness and joy and doing the right thing, the greater good lives. If there's a stroke there, and all that you have is your left hemisphere to rely on. Let's say your right arm is paralyzed, and a doctor says, "Whose arm is that?" Only relying on your left, like get it done, just show up mode. Oh, doctor, that's your arm. I mean, absolute lies.
Hmm.
So you wonder why our politics is so divided, and this side is they dug their heels in, and this side dug their heels in. They're using their left hemispheres because we're just going to get this done, and we're going to push it through, and I'm right. It lies. It doesn't even know it's lying. It's sure it's right. Why? Because that damn rabbit that's running through the bushes, that needs to be dinner for my tribe right now, and I have to go and get. Where's my spirit? Right? There's no time.
Hmm.
So there's just an urgency, but what you've done is you've lost the rest of the world. You've fractured everything away. So this is what happens when we're in a, this is what led to the surveillance economy that we have, where there's cameras on the red lights and tracking people's work that happened during the pandemic. It's a lack of trust. You have to have control over something when you're using that hemisphere. So the right side is comprehend and this side is apprehend. Get it? Anyway, so I'm going to pause there, but you get this, right? We need both of them, but modern society is leading us to live more in this. I know I'm right and there's nothing else out there, but we're living in a map. We're living in a database. We're living in this is the marketing data and the landscape, and it's crap because it's not a life. It's not the earth. It's not real life. So that's the problem. We need to return ourselves more often to our right hemisphere, which is the only way we can truly show up. It's easy to do. You reset yourself.
Sure.
You pause. You breathe. You drink your water. This is not hard, but we're so practiced in this urgency of my schedule. I have another meeting. I got to get this done. So we're living there too often
So,
in the left hemisphere.
so I want to be respectful of your time, and I was thinking. So, do you think that this concept that I really love about to be able to truly show up in your life, would you say the way people can start is just being intentional anytime you're with yourself? What do you really want, what do you really need, and then with the people that you love, how do I want to be seen by these people?
Yes. So you said two things. Be intentional, right? The main question in the book, how am I choosing to show up? And I'll tell you what's built in there. There's an embodied practice. How am I choosing to show up? Not what am I going to do? How am I choosing to show up? There's an exhale and there's a widening of the lens, and there's agency, there's choice. There's a reason the word choose is circled.
Right.
There's a reason the book is not truly show up, which is a dictate. How? Because I'm about, and I was told by a lot of people that the title of the book ought to be something people want to achieve. Truly show up. Oh, I want that. But then I'm playing to the left hemisphere. What I want to do, because I'm not about selling books, I'm about helping the world. But so I chose the how we choose, because right there is an embodied process. It kind of brings you to the mountain looking down. Wow, a lot of choice here. It gives you agency. So you have the power. There's no more victimization. There's no more performance mode or fear or shame. I'm in charge of my showing up.
Right.
Right. So there's breath, there's stepping back.
I really love the idea of agency. And I've spoken about this with several friends and experts recently, because I think there is a difference between, even if you've been through some trauma in your life, even if you've been aggrieved in some terrible ways, I think there's a difference between being victimized and having the identity of being a victim. Because I think if we operate on this concept that I am a victim, then I think that's how we
Right.
see all things. Whereas I would say it's probably 1,000 times harder to act with agency and act as a
Mhm.
how do you say to act as a I guess a cheerleader for yourself when you think that you're
Yeah.
always the victim. But if you're choosing how to show up in different scenarios, I think you can start being the hero of your own story instead of thinking the entire world is against you.
Right. So the entire world shows up as a representation of the past for you. It reflects you. So that's exactly right. In your left hemisphere, when you're just showing up, you're in victim mode. Absolutely, the world shows up victimizing you.
Right.
It can't do anything
It's the only thing
else
you see.
unless there's a right. So the world shows up to you how you show up to it. Don't forget that. So if you want the world to show up differently for you, you better walk in with the energy that you want to receive. So we can't comprehend the moment. There is no presence when we're in get it done mode because what's happening is we've stopped time and what we see is a projection from the past. We literally are representing. It is the world is a representation of what we expect, of our assumptions when we are just showing up.
Right.
That's how dangerous it is. Groundhog Day, okay?
Right.
If you want the world to keep showing up the way it did, if you want your life to keep being the same way, just show up to it. And that's exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
Congratulations. You've learned nothing new, nothing of beauty, nothing of awe, nothing of wonder is going to be there for you unless you kind of, at least for a few moments, settle back into your more expansive attention mode, which is where you notice there's something new in that person. There's something, I'm seeing them differently. Okay, so the world will show up differently for you and you won't be a victim anymore because you're showing up as a victim.
Right. There's a really great concept that I was just presented with recently. Whereas journaling's been a giant thing for me my entire life. If my brain
Mm,
runs a million miles a minute. If I find that it's getting like there's a bit of a traffic jam in there, I like to journal in however ways, either on my computer or with a pen and paper, and so I can organize all of my thoughts, and it's been super helpful. But someone told me recently, they're like, yes, but sometimes when you're journaling, you're just you're just putting more analysis to a situation and bypassing how you feel and how you actually what you want. And someone challenged me like,
mhm,
when you have something that you're trying to make a decision on, or when you want to journal about something, before you start,
mhm.
just sit and, to use your terminology, show up for yourself and ask yourself, well,
Uh-huh.
what do I really feel here? Do I feel like I like this deal? Do I feel like I like this person? Do I feel safe around this person? Do I feel safe in this environment with these group of people? Whatever the case may be. And then when you know
Right.
that, then go and write and think about it through the lens of how you, I guess, show up for yourself. And it's completely
Mhm,
changed what my journaling
mhm.
practice looks like. And it's been, so I just wanted to share that because it's been really a mind expander for me the last couple of months.
Yes, that's amazing. So you're truly showing up for your journaling, which by the way is one of the recommendations in the book. And there's a lot, and I have a whole page of neuroscience around what journaling does physiologically and cognitively for us. But what you also mentioned is attuning to your intuition and safety. And I want to talk about that in being grounded for our self role. I talk about that. Safety is the bottom. It is the foundation. It is what everything rests on. If something in our first, 8 years of life made us feel that the world isn't safe for us, right? If there was a caregiver who wasn't there for us when we were very young, um, our nervous system will be wired such that we don't feel truly safe in the world. And unfortunately, we put that energy out there, and even someone who is safe, we're not going to trust that relationship because at some point that person who we feel so good with is going to be done with us, right? Safety is absolutely huge. And None of us, no parents were perfect. People got sick, people were absent, people took trips, people were angry, people were triggered because of what their own parents did, right? So, and didn't do. So it's up to us to reground ourselves. This is where the journaling, the meditation comes in, and being in touch with our intuition, which Michael, you said you are, is absolutely huge, because after intuition, that's when we start to connect with the world. That's when imagination kicks in. And then that is where a creative, inventive mode of life, the adventuresomeness, the zeal for life, is open to us. So that's the path. So being safe and in touch with our intuition is a foundational step, and I talk about it in the chapter on grounding, which is the skill for our self role.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up, because yeah, I wouldn't say I'm great at intuition, but I say I'm doing the emotional reps every day to get stronger with it, and so I can definitely confirm how helpful it is the stronger that gets. So thank you so much for sharing this concept of truly showing up and for writing the book. And I guess for everybody listening or watching, where can people find you?
Well, the book is on Amazon. How We Choose to Show Up, Marcy Axelrod. My website is choosetoshow.up.com.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And please do be in touch, because if this, I want feedback, right? If these concepts aren't useful to people, I want to know how to make them better. If they are useful, I want to know.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thanks again.
Thank you, Michael.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you didn't enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.